You've heard of love at first sight. But what if love was just part of the bet? A bet that could change everything. In a city where the rich walk with their heads held high and the rest of the world seems like a distant echo, Sofia has always lived in the shadows. A maid in a luxurious household, she cleans the opulent floors where fortunes are made, and the air smells of wealth she can only dream of. Her life is simple, too simple. But all of that is about to shift in ways she never saw coming. Sofia's friends, always pushing her to take risks, dare her to do something bold, something out of the ordinary. And so, in a moment of reckless humor, Sofia accepts a challenge. Buy a husband online. It was a joke, a harmless bet that seemed like nothing more than a laugh. Who could possibly take online matchmaking seriously? But fate, as it often does, had other plans. What Sofia doesn't know, as she clicks that buy button, is that her life is about to be flipped upside down. The man she's purchased isn't some random stranger or some rich playboy looking for a laugh. No, he's someone entirely unexpected. The man Sofia is about to meet is Ethan Montgomery, a self-made billionaire CEO with more money and power than Sofia could ever comprehend. And just like that, her little gamble has become the highest stakes game of her life. So, what happens when a maid marries a billionaire? And can love really thrive in a world where status and wealth define who you are? The game has begun, and the world she knows is crumbling right before her eyes. Before we dive deeper into Sofia's wild journey, let me ask you, what would you do if you found out the person you bought online was a billionaire? Imagine the shock, the confusion, your world flipping upside down in an instant. Would you panic? Would you be in awe? Or maybe, you'd be wondering how you could turn this unexpected twist into something bigger? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know what you would do in Sofia's shoes. And hey, if you're already hooked on this story, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. This story is only getting started, and I promise it's going to be one you won't forget. The city pulses with energy, the streets alive with the constant hum of luxury and ambition. Towering skyscrapers rise up like giants, their glass facades reflecting the endless stretch of blue sky above, each one home to someone who owns a piece of the world. Penthouses, with panoramic views of the skyline, sit high above the streets, shining with wealth. From these heights, the city's power brokers rule, their decisions shaping the lives of everyone below them. The air feels thick with money, like you could almost taste it. Every corner, every shop, every luxury brand screaming opulence and exclusivity. And then, there's Sofia, a small figure in a world of giants. She walks through this city with purpose, but not with pride. She's just another maid, barely scraping by. Her hands are rough from the hours of cleaning, dusting, scrubbing, the tasks she's been doing for years in the homes of the wealthy, the people who live a life she can only dream of. Each day feels like the one before it, her routine predictable, her future uncertain. She moves through the grand halls of the city's most exclusive addresses, invisible to the ones who reside there. These are people with names that appear in magazines, faces that grace billboards, and fortunes that could fill 100 lifetimes. Sofia? She's just a shadow in their world, barely noticed, just doing her job and keeping her head down. But on one fateful evening, everything changes. Sofia's friends, all of them from similar walks of life, decide to push her out of her comfort zone. After a long day of work, they gather at a small, dimly lit cafe, laughing about everything and nothing at all. And that's when it happens. One of her friends, in the middle of a conversation about love and relationships, dares Sofia to do something outrageous. Buy an online husband, they joke, a mischievous grin spreading across their faces. Just for fun. You never know. Maybe you'll find the one who'll whisk you away from all this. It's said in jest. But Sofia, feeling the weight of her predictable existence, takes the challenge seriously. At first, it's just a laugh. A way to spice up her mundane routine. After all, it's just a ridiculous idea. Who could possibly take buying a husband online seriously? But the idea sticks with her. And that night, back in her tiny apartment, the weight of a humdrum life presses down on her again. For the first time in a long time, she feels something bubbling inside her. A strange sense of anticipation, a spark she hasn't felt in years. She sits at her computer, her fingers hovering over the mouse as she clicks through the online profiles of men. Most of them are laughable, clearly fake, promising a lifetime of happiness with a few charming words and cheesy photos. Sofia scrolls past them, unimpressed. But something keeps her there. Something calls her to click just one more profile. She doesn't know why. Maybe it's the thrill of doing something wild, or maybe it's the hope that something extraordinary might just happen. And then, she finds him. Ethan Montgomery. The profile looks like nothing out of the ordinary at first. But as she reads further, something catches her attention. There's no mistaking it. The man behind the profile isn't just another guy looking for a laugh. He's a self-made billionaire, the CEO of Montgomery Enterprises, a name that rings out across the city. She blinks, her heart racing, as she scans the words again. A man who made his fortune from the ground up, who's built a reputation so powerful that it's practically untouchable. Ethan Montgomery isn't just any man. He's the one everyone talks about in hushed tones. His name is synonymous with success, wealth, and power. Sofia's heart skips a beat as she reads about his accomplishments. His companies dominate entire industries, and his influence stretches far beyond the city limits. He's at the pinnacle of everything Sofia could never dream of. A man who owns everything, a man who can have anything. But here he is, in a profile that's part of a joke, an online auction that Sofia is now seriously considering. For a brief moment, the idea seems so outlandish, so far from her world, that she's unsure if she should laugh it off. But then, something inside her stirs. She can't shake the thought of it. Could it really be true? Could she really, in some twisted way, be buying the very thing that people spend their whole lives chasing? Sofia hesitates for only a moment, her mind racing. She clicks the buy button. It's impulsive. It's reckless. But in a world where she's felt invisible for so long, where every day is just about surviving, maybe this is the only way to break free from her own limitations. Maybe, just maybe, this is the chance she's been waiting for. As she hits the button, a small part of her wonders what she's gotten herself into. Little does she know, this one simple click will send her life spiraling into a world that's anything but ordinary. The life she's known will never be the same again. The man she's just purchased, Ethan Montgomery, will enter her world, and everything she thought she knew about herself, about love, and about what it means to belong will be tested in ways she can't even begin to imagine. Sofia's heart races as she waits, standing in the lobby of a luxurious hotel. The marble floors gleam under the soft light, the walls adorned with art pieces worth more than her entire life savings. She's surrounded by opulence, yet she feels completely out of place. The towering glass windows offer a stunning view of the city's skyline, a sight that only a few, like the man she's about to meet, can truly appreciate. She's nervous, but she tells herself it's just a meeting. After all, this was all part of the bet. She thought this would be a joke, a man who'd show up, make some small talk, maybe offer a laugh or two about how ridiculous their situation was. She thought she could get through this easily, just a few awkward minutes before she could move on with her life. But the man who walks through the hotel's grand entrance is nothing like she expected. Ethan Montgomery stands tall in the doorway, his presence commanding the room. His sharp suit hugs his athletic frame, exuding power and control. His gaze sweeps the lobby, and when his eyes finally land on her, there's a moment, a beat of silence, that feels like the world has stopped. For the briefest of moments, Sofia wonders if she's been caught in a dream. He's not just handsome, he's striking, his confidence like a force that presses against her. He is everything she isn't, everything she never thought she could be. But then, as she looks at him, the gravity of the situation hits her. This isn't some online fantasy. This is real. And this man, the one she thought she'd be able to laugh off, is far from the easy pawn she expected. He's not playing by the same rules she is, and that realization shakes her to the core. Ethan approaches her with a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. He extends his hand, his voice smooth and controlled as he introduces himself. Sofia, I presume. She can barely manage a smile, unsure of what to say, but she shakes his hand, the warmth of his touch sending a jolt through her. In that instant, she knows this isn't a game. This is something more complicated, something that will force her to confront parts of herself she's never thought about. As they sit down to talk, the awkwardness between them begins to fade. But there's an undeniable tension in the air. Sofia doesn't know it yet, but she's just stepped into a world where she's not in control anymore. She thought she could handle this, thought it would be easy. But Ethan isn't just a wealthy CEO, he's a man whose life is defined by expectations that Sofia can't begin to understand. As their conversation unfolds, it becomes clear that Ethan is carrying the weight of more than just his empire. His family, his powerful, influential family, disapproves of him. Sofia listens in stunned silence as he casually mentions the pressure he faces from them. His mother, his father, his relatives, they all have one thing in common. They believe no woman is worthy of a Montgomery unless she matches his status. Unless she's rich, powerful, and influential. The idea of a maid, someone from Sofia's world, being even remotely acceptable to the family is laughable to them. Ethan's challenge isn't just about winning Sofia's heart. It's about challenging the very foundations of his family's values. It's about rejecting everything they've tried to instill in him. That love is a transaction. That your worth is determined by the wealth you inherit, not the person you truly are. His trap between his desire to live his own life and the pressure to please the family who controls everything. The first clash between Sofia and Ethan isn't a dramatic outburst or a public fight. It's a silent struggle, one that takes place in their very souls. Sofia's insecurities bubble to the surface as she begins to realize the vast divide between their worlds. She feels small in his presence. How could someone like her ever be enough for a man like him? A man whose name is synonymous with power? But for Ethan, it's different. He's torn between his family's disapproval and his growing feelings for Sofia, a woman who has nothing to offer him in terms of status or wealth. She's everything his family would never accept, yet is drawn to her in a way he can't explain. The more they talk, the more it becomes clear. He sees her as something real, something beyond the walls of money and status. But as much as he may want to pursue this relationship, he knows that the consequences will be severe. In the face of their personal conflict, there's one undeniable truth. They are both being judged, not for who they are as individuals, but for what they represent in the eyes of society. Sofia, the maid, and Ethan, the billionaire, are more than just a couple. They are symbols of everything that divides them. They are fighting not just for love, but for a chance to exist on their own terms, free from the judgment of the world around them. Sofia may have thought this was just a game, but she's about to learn that love, real, true love, comes with challenges she never could have predicted. And Ethan is about to face a battle he never imagined, one that could cost him everything he's worked for, including the one person who has made him feel like he's finally found something worth fighting for. Sofia's mind races as she watches Ethan, the man she's just met, navigate the world with ease. He moves through the city's most exclusive restaurants, attends high society parties, and speaks with influential people who greet him with reverence. And then there's her, Sofia, the maid from the other side of the tracks, the woman who grew up with nothing. She can't help but feel like an imposter, walking in a world where she doesn't belong. Every time they step into a new venue, it's like the spotlight shines on her, and it's too much. She feels out of place in the glitzy, glamorous world he inhabits. Every woman around Ethan seems to be the picture of perfection, elegant, graceful, and dripping in wealth. Sofia watches them from the sidelines, their designer clothes and flawless makeup serving as a constant reminder of the distance between her and them. The comparison is unavoidable. These women seem like the kind of people Ethan should be with. They have the status, the wealth, and the beauty that Sofia lacks. She can't help but wonder if, deep down, Ethan sees her the same way, just a bit, just a fleeting distraction in his life. She asks herself if he could ever truly love someone like her. Someone who comes from nothing, who can barely keep up with the pace of his world. In every glance and every conversation, Sofia searches for clues. Does Ethan look at her with affection? Or is she just another game to him? His kind, yes, but is it out of genuine interest? Or is it because of the bizarre situation they've found themselves in? She can't help but feel like she's teetering on the edge of something, a precipice where she could fall into self-doubt and never climb back up. The moment of truth comes when Ethan's mother, the epitome of grace and wealth, invites Sofia to a party at their mansion. The invitation is wrapped in subtle mockery, and Sofia can feel it as soon as she steps into the luxurious home. It's like being thrown into the lion's den, surrounded by people who live in a world she's only seen in magazines. Everyone stares at her, sizing her up. Their whispers are like daggers, their judgment sharp and cutting. Ethan's mother, the queen of this domain, doesn't mince words. She welcomes Sofia with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes, throwing insults masked as compliments. "How sweet," she says, eyeing Sofia's modest dress. "It's so nice that someone like you could make it into our circle." The thinly veiled criticism stings, but Sofia forces a smile, trying to hold her ground. She feels small under the weight of their scrutiny. As she looks around, she wonders if she's in over her head. How can she compete with these women, these people who have everything, when all she has is herself? But it doesn't end there. Ethan's father, a man whose cold demeanor matches his fortune, calls Ethan aside during the party. Sofia watches from a distance as their conversation grows heated. Ethan's father pressures him to distance himself from her, to let go of this absurd relationship. He tells Ethan that his future, his legacy, is at stake. A man like him can't afford to tarnish his name by associating with someone like Sofia. "You deserve better," his father insists, the words cutting through the air like a whip. "A woman who understands your world. A woman who can elevate you." Sofia, watching from across the room, feels her heart break with each word that passes between them. Ethan, the man who she thought was her ally, is caught between his desire to follow his heart and his duty to his family's expectations. It's clear now, Ethan is trapped. The weight of his family's expectations is suffocating him, and Sofia is starting to feel the pressure of being the one who could tear everything apart. She wants to believe that Ethan will choose her, but the doubts are starting to creep in. The tension between them grows, and Sofia's internal struggle intensifies. She feels herself unraveling, piece by piece. Every time she catches sight of Ethan with his family or surrounded by the glamorous women in his life, she's reminded of the distance between them. She begins to question her worth. Could she really fit into his world? Is she just a temporary distraction in his life? A fleeting moment in the grand scheme of things? Ethan, on the other hand, is torn. He's never felt more conflicted in his life. His family's approval has always been his guiding force, the one thing he could rely on. But now, in front of him, is Sofia, someone who challenges everything he's been taught to believe. He feels an undeniable pull toward her, but he knows that choosing her means going against his family. Every decision he makes feels like a choice between love and duty, between his own desires and the legacy his family has built. As the pressure mounts, the cracks in their relationship begin to show. Sofia is drowning in self-doubt, questioning whether she can ever be enough for someone like Ethan. She wonders if he'll ever choose her over his family, or if she's destined to be just another footnote in his story. Meanwhile, Ethan is struggling to keep the peace, but the more his family pushes, the harder it becomes to ignore the truth. His love for Sofia is real, and it's growing stronger with every passing day. But as much as they want to be together, the world around them is pulling them apart, and neither one knows how long they can keep fighting the tide. The tension between their worlds is reaching a breaking point, and soon, they'll have to make a choice, one that could change everything. The night was supposed to be just another dinner, a quiet moment away from the chaos, a brief escape from the mounting pressure of their worlds colliding. But as they sat across from each other in the dimly lit restaurant, the tension between Sofia and Ethan was palpable, thicker than the air around them. Sofia had always felt like something was off, like she was standing at the edge of a precipice, waiting for the ground to crumble beneath her. Tonight, that feeling was stronger than ever. Ethan was distant, his gaze focused on something beyond the candlelight that flickered between them. He was quiet, far quieter than usual, his usually confident posture now slumped slightly, as if he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Sofia could feel it. Something was about to break. The questions that had been swirling in her mind for weeks now hovered just on the edge of her tongue. Was Ethan truly in this with her? Or was she just part of some elaborate game? She had spent so much time questioning herself, wondering if she was enough for him. But now she wondered if he had ever been honest with her. If their relationship, the one she had started to believe in, was real, or if it had all been built on lies. The moment was inevitable. "Sofia, I need to tell you something." Ethan's voice broke through the silence, his words heavy with an unfamiliar tension. She looked up, her heart skipping a beat, a feeling of dread settling in her stomach. His eyes met hers, but there was no warmth in them. Only something cold, something raw, something that made her stomach churn. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan took a deep breath, his fingers gripping the edge of his glass as if it were the only thing anchoring him to reality. "I never knew," he said slowly, the words stumbling out like a confession. "I never knew you were part of a bet. I didn't know this was some sort of game." The words hit Sofia like a slap across the face, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. She blinked, trying to process what he had just said. Had she heard him wrong? Had he really just said that? The room seemed to spin, and the once comforting warmth of the candlelight now felt like a suffocating weight on her chest. "What do you mean?" Sofia's voice cracked as the realization slowly sank in. Ethan leaned forward, his expression now conflicted, tortured even. "I agreed to this marriage, this whole thing, because of my family. They pushed me into it. They wanted me to settle down, to prove I could commit. They told me that if I found someone who actually cared about me, someone who saw me for who I really am, it would be worth it. So, I agreed. But when I met you," he paused, his gaze shifting to the side, as if he couldn't even bear to meet her eyes. "I thought you were the one. I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd be the person who could love me for who I am, not just because of my name, my money, my status." Sofia's world shattered in that moment. The shock hit her like a tidal wave, and her mind scrambled to make sense of the jumble of words that had just come tumbling out of Ethan's mouth. This wasn't real. This wasn't how she had imagined it. All this time, she had believed they were building something genuine. She had thought that maybe, just maybe, this was the love story she'd always dreamed of. But now, in the cold light of his confession, everything felt tainted. So, was their relationship ever real? Was it all just a game to him? Just another part of his family's plan to manipulate him into what they wanted? Had she been nothing more than a pawn in a grand scheme she hadn't even been aware of? The questions were like daggers, each one cutting deeper than the last. Sofia struggled to keep her composure, the weight of the truth pressing down on her like 1,000 tons. She stared at Ethan, searching his face for any sign of reassurance, any hint that what he said didn't mean what it sounded like. But there was nothing. His eyes were filled with regret. But that didn't change the fact that she was now standing at the crossroads of everything she had built in her mind. She had believed in him. She had believed in them. But now, she didn't know what to believe in anymore. Ethan seemed to sense the distance growing between them. He reached out, his hand hovering over hers. But Sofia recoiled, unable to bridge the gap that had suddenly appeared. She pulled her hand away, a flood of emotions, hurt, confusion, betrayal, rushing to the surface. She couldn't look at him, couldn't bring herself to face the man who had just ripped the very foundation of their relationship apart. You never told me," Sofia whispered, the words choking in her throat. "You never told me this was a bet. You never told me the truth." Ethan's face crumpled with guilt. "I didn't know. I had no idea. I thought you were different." His voice was thick with emotion, but the damage had been done. The trust they had slowly built had crumbled away in an instant, and Sofia wasn't sure it could be rebuilt. Sofia looked down at her lap, trying to steady her breathing, trying to calm the storm inside her. Was this all just a game to him? Had everything she had felt, everything she had hoped for, been a lie? And if it had been, what did that make her? A pawn in his game? Just another bet to be won or lost? The silence between them stretched on, thick and uncomfortable, until Sofia finally stood, unable to remain in the seat where she felt trapped by his words. "Maybe I was wrong about you," she said quietly, her voice trembling with the weight of everything unsaid. "Maybe I was wrong about all of this." And with that, she walked away, leaving Ethan behind, standing in the ruins of a relationship neither of them had fully understood. Sofia retreats to the quiet of her small apartment, the weight of Ethan's confession pressing on her chest like a 1,000-pound stone. The walls that once felt comforting now seem to close in around her, suffocating her with the reality of what she's just learned. Every step she takes feels heavier than the last, her thoughts spiraling into a vortex of confusion and hurt. The life she had so carefully imagined for herself, the one where she and Ethan could make their own path, free from the expectations of the world, now feels impossible. She's overwhelmed with guilt. The crushing weight of feeling like she's never truly belonged in Ethan's world sits on her shoulders. The life she had dreamed of, The fairy tale she had imagined is slipping through her fingers like sand. How could she have been so naive? How could she have believed that someone like Ethan, someone with so much power, so much status, could see her for who she really was? Her mind races with questions. Does he truly love her? Or has she been just another pawn in a game that she didn't understand? The whispers of doubt consume her every waking moment. Maybe she was never meant to be in his world. Maybe this whole relationship had just been part of his family's plan to make him settle down, to get him to conform to the perfect Montgomery image. She had been foolish to think that someone like her, someone who had nothing, could ever truly fit into a life like his. But as the days drag on, Sofia can't escape the gnawing emptiness inside her. She's torn between the love she feels for Ethan, the man who made her feel special, who made her feel like she was worth something, and the knowledge that his world is one that may never accept her. She questions everything about their time together. Every touch, every kind word, every moment she thought was genuine now feels tainted. Was she just a convenient distraction for him? A brief escape from the suffocating world his family had built for him? Meanwhile, Ethan is living his own personal nightmare. He can feel the pull of his family's expectations tightening around him like a noose. They've been pushing him from the moment he made the decision to be with Sofia. His mother, cold and calculating, watches his every move, her disapproving gaze always lurking in the background. His father, the ever-present figure of control, has made it clear that Sofia is not welcome in their world. They see her as a threat to the perfect image they've spent years cultivating. Ethan had thought that his feelings for Sofia could break through the barriers his family had set up for him. But now, as the pressure mounts, he realizes that every step he takes to defend her only drives him further into conflict with a family he's spent his entire life trying to please. His mother has been making subtle moves to discredit Sofia, while his father has made it clear that he expects Ethan to distance himself from her, no matter the cost. The Montgomery family sees Sofia as an obstacle, a disruption to their carefully constructed empire. They've done everything in their power to pull Ethan back into the fold, but the more they try to control him, the more he pushes back. The more they try to break him down, the more he digs in his heels. But even as he fights for Sofia, even as he stands up to his family, he can't help but feel the weight of his own guilt pressing down on him. Ethan has always been the perfect son, the perfect heir to the Montgomery legacy. He's always followed the rules, played the part, and done what was expected of him. But now, with Sofia in his life, he feels like he's standing on the edge of everything he's ever known. The world he's spent years building is crumbling around him, and is losing his place in it. The pressure is unbearable. His family is losing patience with him, and Sofia is becoming more distant with every passing day. He watches as the rift between them grows wider. He knows that his family will never accept her, that they will continue to see her as nothing more than a threat to their power. But Ethan can't bring himself to let go. Every time he looks at Sofia, he sees the woman he fell in love with, the woman who saw him for who he truly was, not for the money or the name he carried. She had been a breath of fresh air in his stifling world. She had made him feel alive in a way that no one else had ever done. Yet the more he fights for her, the more the Montgomerys dig in their heels. His family's disapproval is louder than ever, and their disdain for Sofia becomes more palpable. They are losing ground in the battle for Ethan's heart, and they are desperate to win him back into their fold. His father, always the voice of authority, pulls him aside once again. "You're making a mistake," he warns, his voice sharp and cold. "This woman is not one of us. You're putting your entire future at risk for someone who doesn't understand our world." But Ethan can't bring himself to turn away from her. Sofia has become his world, the one thing that feels real in a life that has been nothing but a series of expectations and obligations. But the more he defies his family, the more he feels the weight of their rejection. He's losing his place in their world, and with every move he makes, he fears that he might lose Sofia as well. The stakes have never been higher, and as the battle between love and family escalates, Ethan finds himself in a position where there are no easy choices. Ethan's father, still reeling from the blow, stepped forward, his voice thick with anger. "You're making a mistake, son. You can't throw away everything for one woman." Ethan shook his head, a quiet, resolute smile crossing his face. "No, father. The mistake was thinking I needed everything you wanted for me to be happy. I've spent my whole life trying to live up to your expectations, but I'm done. I'm choosing my own happiness. I'm choosing Sofia. The power that had once belonged to the Montgomery family now seemed to shift. The cold, calculated control that had ruled their world was crumbling, and in its place, something new was emerging. Sofia wasn't just a maid in their eyes anymore. She was a woman who had changed everything. And Ethan wasn't just their heir. He was a man who had defined himself by his choices, his values, and his love for the woman standing beside him. The applause came slowly at first, hesitant, but soon it grew louder, filling the room with a sense of vindication, of justice delivered. Ethan and Sofia stood together, their hearts united, as the power they had once been forced to bow to began to shift in their favor. Ethan had made his choice, and in doing so, he had redefined who he was. He was no longer the perfect Montgomery heir. He was Ethan, a man who stood by his values, his love, and his future with the woman he had chosen to share it with. And for the first time, both of them felt free. The days following the confrontation felt like a new beginning for both Sofia and Ethan. The weight that had hung over them for so long, the pressure from his family and society's expectations, had finally lifted. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, they were facing it together, side by side, with the freedom to make their own choices. Sofia, once a quiet and reserved maid in a world of wealth and privilege, had emerged from the ashes of her doubts. She was no longer just the woman they had tried to degrade. She was Sofia, a woman who had fought for her place, her voice, and her future. No longer defined by the walls of the home she cleaned or the opinions of those who saw her as nothing more than a servant. She stepped forward with a newfound confidence. Her relationship with Ethan had shifted as well. It wasn't just about love anymore. It was about respect, partnership, and shared dreams. They had both been tested in ways they hadn't expected, but it had only solidified what they had together. Ethan, with all his wealth and power, had chosen her, not for her status, but for the woman she was. And Sofia, with all her self-doubt and insecurities, had realized that she was worthy of love, true love, not based on what she could give or what she didn't have, but simply for who she was. They began to plan their future together, one where they balanced Ethan's world of luxury and influence with Sofia's roots in humility and hard work. They knew it wouldn't always be easy. There would still be people who looked at them with judgment, who questioned their relationship, who doubted their ability to bridge the gap between their worlds. But they didn't care anymore. They had each other, and that was all that mattered. Sofia made a promise to herself. She would never again hide behind the shadows of others' expectations. She was ready to take her place in the world, to build something of her own, with Ethan by her side. No longer confined by the limits of her past, she began to pursue the things she had always dreamed of. She started her own business, something that combined her creativity and her passion, something that was uniquely hers. Ethan, ever supportive, stood beside her as she took each step forward, proud of the woman she was becoming. For Ethan, the changes were just as profound. No longer would he be the Montgomery heir who lived in the shadows of his family's expectations. The legacy of the Montgomery Empire, with its wealth and influence, no longer defined him. He had broken free from their control, from their vision of what his life should be. And in doing so, he had found something far more valuable. His authenticity, his ability to make decisions based on his own values, and most importantly, his love for Sofia. Ethan's relationship with his family had become strained, the rift widening with every passing day. His decision to distance himself from their toxic control was not an easy one, and it didn't come without consequences. His mother and father made their disapproval known, often attempting to manipulate and guilt him into returning to their world of power and status. But Ethan knew that the life they wanted for him was not the life he wanted for himself. The more he distanced himself from their influence, the more he found his own path. He realized that his true legacy wasn't in the empire his family had built. It wasn't in the wealth, the mansions, or the brands that bore his name. His real legacy would be in the life he created with Sofia, in the love they shared, and in the future they built together. As the months passed, Ethan's resolve only strengthened. He began to carve out a life that was entirely his own, one where his relationship with Sofia took center stage. Together, they traveled, built their dreams, and supported each other through the highs and lows. Ethan began to see the world not through the lens of power and status, but through the lens of authenticity, of being true to himself and the woman he loved. The transformation was not just internal. Ethan became a different man in the eyes of the world, too. The Montgomery name, once a symbol of power and control, now represented something entirely different. Something real, something grounded in love, and in the courage to stand up for what truly mattered. For Sofia, the changes were just as radical. She was no longer the maid in the corner, cleaning up after others. She was now the woman who had reclaimed her place in the world, not just beside Ethan, but on her own terms. She had found her voice and was determined to use it. Her business flourished, her confidence soared, and the woman who had once doubted her worth now stood as an example of what it meant to fight for your dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. Together, Ethan and Sofia had proven that love could survive against all odds. Their relationship was more than just a romantic tale. It was a testament to the power of choice, the courage to defy societal norms, and the strength to build a life based on love, respect, and authenticity. And as they stood together, hand in hand, looking out at the life they had built, no longer defined by wealth or power, but by their love for each other, the future felt limitless. It was a future they had fought for, a future where their love would always come first, above all else. How far would you go to stand up for the one you love? Would you defy your family, your friends, or even everything you've ever known just to be with that person? What's the biggest risk you've ever taken for love? I want to hear your stories. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts with me. And if you've enjoyed this incredible journey, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. There are more stories of love, courage, and the bold choices we make when we fight for what matters most.